TSN Bardown's Luca Celebre joining us here on this Monday morning. Luca, good to see you. Hope you had a great weekend. And let's start with, of course, probably the biggest story certainly in terms of like local sports. NHL trade deadline. The Leafs have already made a pretty big deal, but the whole Patrick Kane situation is still kind of up in the air. What are your thoughts on the trade deadline as it approaches?
Yeah, it's pretty crazy what we've seen. And just yesterday, the biggest name on the board, aside from Kane being moved, and Timo Meier to the New Jersey Devils, and the Lightning trading 5 picks for Tanner Jeannot, the Nashville Predators. There's a lot going on, and it seems like a lot of the teams in the East, which is something to point out, are the ones kind of making these all-in moves, which is really interesting. And when you talk about Patrick Kane, you talk about him being linked to the New York Rangers, who have already made a move for Vladimir Tarasenko. The crazy part about this all is the Devils and Rangers are probably going to play each other in round 1. The Leafs and Lightning probably going to play each other in round 1. Only 2 of those teams are advancing, so it seems like all of the Eastern Conference is kind of just loading up, but only one team is going to get through. And the West, meanwhile, there really haven't been any significant moves from the contenders yet in a much weaker conference. So just an interesting kind of trend we're seeing, and these all-in moves are only going to work out for one team. It's going to be tough for some of those teams. I think the Devils probably have the best move in the sense that Meier is an RFA, and they can hopefully lock him up long-term once the off-season comes. But if you're the Rangers and you've made the trades for Tarasenko and everyone is thinking that Patrick Kane is on his way there and you get eliminated in the first round, it's a tough look, but that's just how good the Eastern Conference is top to bottom. So it really is just a competition between these teams trying to just get the upper hand and load up in a year where every team in the East is really good.
Interesting to see how the pendulum swung, because for so long it was like the West was so great, the West, and now it's really flipped. That's interesting. I just got to quickly ask you, Luca, what do you think the pressure is like on Kyle Dubas this year of all years?
Yeah, I think the pressure was before the Ryan O'Reilly trade pretty high up there, and the O'Reilly trade has been a big success so far. Obviously, he's going to be judged by what happens in the playoffs, but he's done everything he can to this point to improve this team with the assets that they have without mortgaging their future as far as their prospects go.
Gotcha.
You're going to have to trade a first-round pick. So he did that finally, and he got the best player that I think he's acquired in his tenure as Leafs manager.
And O'Reilly has definitely sort of shone since joining the Leafs, that's for sure. Seems to have sort of come out of his shell or broken out of something. In the meantime, on the ice, they pretty handily beat the Kraken, and we're seeing a lot of points coming in once again from Mitch Marner and Austin Matthews.
Yeah, and I think it's nice to see it from Austin Matthews. I know it's been just an interesting season from him as far as the points and goals go. He was probably the most popular bet to win the Rocket Richard after what he did last year, and the goals just haven't been there. He's been hurt a little bit, but he's still that dominant two-way player, whether he's putting pucks in the net or not, and he's still one of the best players in hockey. So you know he's just going to produce when the time is right. But that top 6, just of him, Marner, Tavares, Nylander, O'Reilly, and Bunting too, it's one of the best, if not the best, top 6s in all of hockey, especially the way William Nylander is playing. I think people are starting to give him the credit that he's probably deserved for a while now, and it might not even be enough because he's just been probably the most consistent forward through injuries and what have you. He's just shown up every night from the start of the season to now and has led this team. Yeah,
it's definitely been a good season for Willie Nylander, no doubt about that. Luca, before we let you go, the Raps kind of laid an egg against Cleveland. Not that Cleveland's a bad team, but, you know, after what we'd seen lately, this was kind of a disappointing one.
Yeah, a little bit of a disappointing one for sure. And like you said, Cleveland, not a bad team by any stretch. And I think the thing that, I mean, the Raptors are a solid team. They're still fighting for that kind of 8th spot in the playoffs. And the good news for them is 6 of their next 10 opponents are kind of not in a playoff spot. So if you can take advantage of just beating those teams that you're supposed to beat, and maybe getting a couple of surprise wins against teams like Cleveland, which you'll need to do to just string off some wins, then maybe we see this team in the playoffs. But obviously, as far as measuring sticks games go, Cleveland is pretty darn good. And to see what they did against the Raptors, maybe just tempers expectations going forward as the second half of the season kind of comes down here.
Right. Okay, Luca, appreciate you tempering our expectations and giving us all we need to know to sort of get the week going sports-wise. Good to chat with you. We'll chat soon, I'm sure. Take care.